Lifespans class. This is Dr. Ang coming in to welcome you to week 4. So we're looking at September 13th through the 19th for week 4. And also that is going to include chapters 7 and 8. And we're focused this week on the preschool child. I wanted to offer a little bit of clarification. Seems like there's been a little confusion regarding the reflective papers. And yes, the reflective papers will concentrate on one of Erickson's stages at a time. So that's why there's so many scattered throughout the semester. And they kind of coincide as we roll through and as the semester unfolds. By the time we get to the end, I believe there's 8 of them. That coincide with these stages of Erickson. So basically, for those of you that are eager and want to jump in with both feet, you can go ahead and conclude those, work ahead and get them out of the way if that would help with your semester load. You're certainly welcome to do that once you kind of get the flow of what it's going to be. If you want to wait until each chapter, each week unfolds, and then you can crank that out Sunday by midnight of that week, that's perfectly acceptable too. And that's the way the syllabus kind of reads and the schedule unfolds kind of organically. So that's what I will be anticipating from each of you. I did receive several submissions early that were papers that included the entire Erickson stages, all of them in one. Good content, good analysis, just not really the point of those assignments. At the end, we will have an all-inclusive paper that you submit, and that's more or less how am I going to take that information and apply it into my career path. How can I use that possibly in my academic career, but more so thinking through if I'm going to be a nurse, if I'm going to be a coach, if I'm going to whatever speech path, if that's where your career path will take you, wherever it is, how can I unfold and use some of these stages, knowing the life stages and the lifespan of the individual, and I can take that developmental foundation in my tool belt as I approach in my academic career. So that's the clarification for the reflective papers. I have reached out to some of you that have reached out to me when you identified that on your own, and I will take a resubmission if you feel that you need that. Again, I don't think that one of those is going to hurt your grade tremendously, but if that's important to you, by all means you can resubmit that now that there's been some clarification. So looking at this week, chapters 7 and 8, we're looking at the preschooler. Love this age. This is where by this time they're learning about 10 new words each day. They are, by the time they're ages 6, they're going to have a pretty extensive vocabulary, and it's building every day. As they went through toddlers, preschooler, stage, they're building that vocabulary, they're establishing that sense of what the world is around them, and they're formulating their own opinions of that, whereas up until this stage that information has kind of been told to them. They're starting to wake up and be more aware of that, and now that they have a little firmer understanding, they're able to develop some of those thought processes a little more clearly. So I'm going to zip through the PowerPoint of some of these that I want to make sure that you are aware of, some of the slides. Let's see, also the preschooler is, in a sense, let's see, where is it? It's important for us to, as you educate and you have patience for the preschooler as they are seeking, they're knowledge seekers. So when we think of where do they spend a lot of their time? Probably at this point they're in a formalized school setting or homeschooled. But if they're in a formalized school setting, they're with someone else. And then when they come home, it's important to the caregiver, if you have specific values and virtues and morals that you want to teach that child, it's going to be important that there's that connection. But oftentimes we're finding through research is showing that the preschool age kid will come home and they immediately get in front of a screen because that's their downtime from being in a formalized school setting. So if you see in the PowerPoint, you're going to see the stats of how much screen time a preschooler on average gets, and it's kind of astounding and made me look at my own setup a little bit because it's crazy. But when you're going through the PowerPoint, look specifically at zone of proximal development, and that is by Vygotsky, and it's the scaffolding approach. Okay, we have to find out where each child is. So if you're a caregiver, that's going to be a little easier for you. If you're in a classroom setting, we have a lot of kids and we need to find out where their baseline is. Once we find where their baseline is of what they know, and then we realize what they need to know, then we're going to scaffold across with support and patience, just that loving guidance to get to what they need to know. We're going to scaffold approach from what they know to what they don't know. The problem comes in with this, if this approach is not taken, we're going to get a child that we're assuming they know what everyone else knows, and we're scaffolding across, but we're not meeting them where they are. So those are the kids that are going to get frustrated. They may start acting out, and a lot of times we find through acting out that we peel back the onion and realize that we were missing the mark where that child was. Excuse me. So making sure that we are properly educating the child as well. Again, you'll see I have some things in here about the screen time, so make sure you see that. Also, we have a lot of issues sometimes with the preschooler not being able to sleep. They may became independent, sleeping in their own bed. Everything was great, and they're a toddler. Then they wake up, and now when we say we have all these new vocabulary words, they have all this new information that now, as a toddler, it was there, but they weren't fully processing it. Now they're capable of processing it, and it becomes very real to them. This is a child that's going to start to have nightmares. These are also the children in the stages that we don't want going to bed watching a scary movie. We don't particularly want them even going to bed on a screen. It's a time when they need to relax their brain with a very routine bedtime, a very routine set of this is what we do. We read a book, we lay together for a little while, we just talk quietly, but we don't have a screen or something that's just blaring in their face and keeps them just on edge all the time. So it's important that they can decompress from that, and they need their sleep. We're looking at about 12 hours is what the American Board of Pediatrics is recommending for the preschooler. That's a lot of sleep, maybe in our adult standards. So we want to make sure that we accommodate for that and accommodate for a good night's sleep, which is meaning taking the screens away early, at least an hour before that, limiting screens. Maybe they don't even need it up until an hour before, but limiting that time, giving them a chance to be out in nature, things that can relax their brains because their brains are being taxed and maxed throughout the day. So just remember that for the preschooler. There's a thing called the hurried child that we do to our children here in our current culture, and it's only getting, I don't know if I'd say worse, but it's getting vamped up ever more so. It's things that we would see as a parent living through the child, or in attempt to compete in a variety of scenarios, or the parent or caregiver that is wanting to have that latest social media post to show how amazing their kids are, and not always living through their kids. I mean, there's a lot of, I want my kids to do well, I want my kids to succeed, but when we push past the point where now we're affecting the child, We're seeing children that are getting stressed out younger and younger, and that has now officially tapped into even the preschool stage. They can't read fast enough. They can't, they need to be in the gym practicing whatever. There's their grades, everything that they're doing. Parents need, or caregivers need, that child to be at the top of everything that they do, and they're going to push and push and push, and it creates frustration, and it creates a child that feels like they can never do enough. And when that's already establishing in the preschool child, that's just going to roll in, and be very, very difficult as they try to advance to the next developmental stage. Which brings me to Erickson's. This gets a little cloudy in here for some of these, because some of them overlap. So if you've already done initiative versus guilt, then you don't need to obviously resubmit that. Just make sure you've done a reflection page for each of Erickson's stages. That's all I need. That's going to hit all the requirements for this aspect and this component of the course. But preschooler is in the initiative versus guilt. So they want to have the initiative that I want to learn to read, and they're so excited about reading and they want to read, but then their reports come home and it says they're in the blue group, and then the caregiver says, well, why aren't you in the red group? Come on, what are you doing? You need to be in the red group. Is so-and-so in the red group? Then you need to be, let's go beyond the red group. And everything, then all of a sudden a kid or a preschooler that had that initiative to read is now feeling guilty because they're not doing enough. That goes back to the hurried child scenario, where we're pushing and not letting that child fall where they naturally would fall, and then a little gentle guidance, but not pushing them where we're going to push them over the edge. So that's a boundary that we see a lot, and it begins in the preschool child. So as far as chapter 7, and then I do want a couple things that I want to bring in. So again, this is the stage where there is the overlap of autonomy versus shame and doubt. And then now we're looking at initiative versus guilt. This is the stage of the preschooler where they realize there's a difference between boys and girls. Some of these things were evident as toddlers, but again, they didn't have all the processing capabilities that they have now to distinguish between. It was just very matter of fact. So then now, or there was the physical differences, but there wasn't the emotional and cognitive connection to those differences that they now establish and demonstrate as a preschool child. So they can tell differences and realize there are differences between a mom and a dad. They can tell there's differences between siblings, classmates. They can tell there's differences in race. They can tell differences in the person that they see standing near the stop sign holding the sign, and the difference between some of the neighborhoods they drive by where they see someone walking a cute little dog and they're all decked out, and they see the differences between people and sorry guys, and they see a difference between people in socioeconomical status, but they don't fully comprehend all of that at this point. They just do see that there are differences, and they start to ask questions. And this is the stage where those questions are helping them formulate and scaffold in their own minds. So having a caregiver, a nurturing caregiver in that role, that's why it's so important if they are in a formalized school setting, that it's a nurturing caregiver that has patience to answer these questions, and someone that is going to answer the questions that you would support the responses. And then as a caregiver for a parent or caregiver at home, all of the questions that you hear chirping in the back seat of the car, that it's easy to kind of shut it down, crank up the tunes, and just get where you're going. it's important at that stage to say they might not ask this again, so I should address this because I want my insight, for them to have that and take that into consideration as they develop and grow and they form those cognitive connections. Otherwise, someone else might answer that question and I may or may not agree with their responses. So that's what's so important about the preschooler that is always asking questions. That's another cardinal sign of a preschooler. They develop friendships, and whereas I mentioned last week, toddlers will play side by side. They realize they're over there and they like to know that someone's over there, but they're not necessarily playing and interacting together. But the preschool child now will start to develop some of those social skills, and they'll realize if I'm mean, they won't play with me. If they're mean, I won't play with them. But if we're getting along, we can enjoy each other's company. If I'm playing house and they're playing house, why don't we play house together? And they start to formulate some of those social interactions. There's also a slide in here on discipline and authority. And again, there are lots of parenting and caregiver approaches to parenting and establishing that sense of authority. We just don't want to get it to the point where it's a authoritative, just this is what you're supposed to do it, and you don't answer any questions, you don't give any reasoning, and you don't help them establish for themselves an individual sense of cognition as far as the world around them. So that if it needs to be more of a nurturing setting as far as parenting and establishing those guidelines, where it's a safe environment, but it's also a safe environment where they can explore themselves and you're there to support them. So it needs to be more of an approach for them to establish that initiative versus guilt. So they want to take that initiative. They want to find out. They're knowledge seekers. Let them help guide them to explore that knowledge themselves, while you're there to make sure that they're safe and that they have their questions answered, and they establish that with you as their caregiver, that you're where they go to find answers. And that's so important for the foundation, the developmental stage at this point for a preschooler. Sadly, we also get into abuse and violence in this stage. Let's see. I think we are. Again, going back to, I don't want this to be my soapbox, but because the preschooler has a lot of questions, they do have a lot of energy. They can demand a lot of time out of a caregiver, a lot of resources that when the caregiver has a lot of other things to be doing. So it is okay to have parameters. Okay, now mommy needs to do this, so I need you to do that. Obviously you need to have boundaries and parameters set. What we have to be very careful with is if we do go to the screen time, there is a 67% reported in a research study by American Pediatrics, Academy of Pediatrics, that was just sent, and I think that study was done in 2019, I believe, and it says 67% of preschoolers basically grab the remote and watch whatever they want. They watch whatever the teenagers are watching, whatever the parents are watching, whatever happens to be left on the TV, with no parameters whatsoever. So we're seeing not only, so if they're watching aggression and violence, sexual content, whatever that is, and what we just say, the brain is growing faster than it will ever grow, and it's getting up to, during this stage, it's going to get to 90% of its adult growth during these preschool years. That's how much we're packing into that gray matter for that preschool child. So if they spend a lot of time watching things that are controversial, to say the least, but aggression and violence specifically at this age, aggression and violence, and then we wonder why Johnny is acting out and slamming somebody against the wall at school when they don't give him a toy. You know, you can start to see the correlation, but sometimes it's easy just to, here, go watch something. I got to do this. Can you stop asking me questions? Just go into the other room and watch them. I don't care what you do, just go do something else. And then they sit there with their eyes glued and their jaw hanging open watching something that's aggressive and violent, and then we don't fully understand that those choices have led to that, and that is becoming, also with the preschool child, the habits that they're taking on are going to, these habits will continue to build, continue to form, and they're only going to get bigger and bigger as the child grows past that preschool years. But habits are formed, tendencies are formed in toddlerhood, habits are formed in the preschool child. So what is happening in the preschool child is going to set a pretty solid foundation that the child is going to build on as they enter into those early elementary years. So it's so important when we're talking nutrition. Okay, we've realized that that Jenny likes, we want her to eat fruit. Okay, she likes apples. She does not like bananas. Okay, there's certain things. Jenny, you're going to eat fruit, but I'm going to let you eat the fruits that maybe you prefer, so that I don't get into that fight over every meal. But it's not an option of if you're going to eat fruit or you're going to eat candy or fruit snacks or something. You're going to eat fresh fruit. So we kind of meet them in the middle where they feel that. But those preferences and those habits are going to merge. So as the preschool child forms habits that I always eat fruit. Every day I eat fruit. Every day I eat vegetables. Every day it's important that a healthy meal is in my vocabulary and in my cognitive process. I know that I am to eat healthy. That forms as habits for the preschool child. That will carry on. Sure, it will alter, you know, they get into teenage years as well. I mean, there's things you like, you don't like, and it won't stay the same. But that foundation of knowing it's important to eat healthy is established, and that is planted, and that is rooted, and they can always resort back to that, and it will help guide them, even though they may veer off a little bit. It'll help guide them. On the contrary, if a child in preschool, and it's very easy to do, everything that has a princess or a warrior of any sort, it has a character, they're wearing a cape, the preschool child is going to want that. They're going to be drawn to that. They are still at that stage where they think there's a correlation. If they eat that snack, there's a correlation with that character. So when they see that, if they are solely responsible for what they consume, they're going to probably not consume. There's not any fresh fruit that comes with a character generally. So there has to be that education and that nurturing process that, okay, we can do some of that to supplement, but it's going to come after you have your healthy items. So there can be some give and take there as well, but not just in a dominating, no, you're not having that, you're having this, but just in a nurturing, like, okay, I see that you like that, that's great, we can have one of those, but then this, once you finish your meal, then you can have that, and there's a little bit of give and take. It's helps in that and scaffolding process as well. So, let's see. I believe that is pretty well going to cover it for chapters 7 and 8 for the preschool child. So if you have not done a reflective paper for initiative versus guilt, that'll be due Sunday by midnight. And next week is, you're going to have kind of a week off as far as the chapters, but that's going to be exam 1. And I will go into that a little bit more, but I will, due to the nature of this course, I will be opening that up, and you will have the week to complete that whenever it works for you. And it will be timed, but as I mentioned, you can utilize your resources as you go. But just know that that's on the radar for next week. If you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to me. I am trying to release these grades just as quickly as I can. I was releasing the entire column for the class at once, but I realize that's making it seem really slow for some of y'all. So I'm going to try to do that. I've been covering several lectures and stuff, so I apologize for the little lag in grading those reflective papers. But if any point you specifically need to know something about your grade, reach out to me and I can certainly respond to that. But have a fantastic week. If I can do anything for you, please reach out. Otherwise, enjoy diving into the preschool child. Take care.